You think you understand power. You see it in money, in status, in the ability to make others do what you want. But real power isn't what most people think it is. Real power is sitting in a room full of people who are losing their minds and feeling nothing but calm. It's watching chaos unfold around you while your heart rate stays steady. It's having someone scream at you, insult you, try to break you down, and responding with the emotional temperature of someone discussing the weather. This is emotional control, and it might be the most underestimated form of power that exists. Most people are emotional slaves. They don't realize it, but they are. Their feelings control their decisions. Their moods dictate their actions. Their reactions are predictable, automatic, almost mechanical. When someone cuts them off in traffic, they rage. When someone criticizes them, they defend. When someone rejects them, they crumble. When someone praises them, they glow. They're puppets, and their emotions are the strings. But you can cut those strings. The person who has mastered their emotional responses has achieved something most people will never even attempt. They've taken control of the one thing that controls everything else about them, their internal state. Think about the last time you made a decision while you were angry. How did that work out for you? Think about the last time you said something while you were hurt. Did you regret it later? Think about the last time you acted while you were desperate. Were you proud of that version of yourself? Probably not. Emotions make us stupid. They make us impulsive. They make us weak. And the worst part is, other people know this. Smart people know this. Manipulative people especially know this. They know that if they can control your emotions, they can control you. The person who stays calm while everyone else is losing their minds has access to something the others don't. Clear thinking, objective analysis, the ability to see what's actually happening instead of what their feelings are telling them is happening. Let me tell you about a study that changed how psychologists think about emotional regulation. It was conducted by researchers at Stanford, and it involved showing people disturbing images while monitoring their brain activity. One group was told to simply look at the images and react naturally. The other group was taught a technique called cognitive reappraisal. They were instructed to reframe what they were seeing, to think about it differently, to change the story they told themselves about what was happening in the image. The results were striking. The people who used cognitive reappraisal showed dramatically different patterns of brain activity. Their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, was much less active. Their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive control, was more engaged. But here's what's really interesting. The people who practiced this technique didn't just feel calmer in the moment. Their brains actually started to change. Over time, their default response to emotional stimuli became more controlled, more regulated. They had literally rewired themselves for emotional control. This isn't about suppressing emotions. Suppression doesn't work. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to pop up, and when it does, it's going to make a splash. This is about something different. This is about changing your relationship with your emotions. Instead of being controlled by them, you become the observer of them. When anger arises, you notice it. You don't become it. When fear shows up, you acknowledge it. You don't let it drive the car. When sadness hits, you feel it. But you don't let it define your reality. Most people think their thoughts and emotions are them. They identify completely with whatever is happening in their mind. If they think something, it must be true. If they feel something, it must be important. But you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that observes them. Once you understand this, everything changes. You start to realize that emotions are just information. They're data points. They tell you something about your current state, your current situation, your current needs. But they don't have to control your response. Think about it this way. If you're driving and your fuel gauge shows empty, that information is useful. It tells you that you need to find a gas station. But you don't panic. You don't start crying. You don't get angry at the fuel gauge. You simply use the information to make a decision. Emotions can work the same way. Anger might tell you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear might tell you that you need to pay attention to a potential threat. Sadness might tell you that something important has been lost. But none of these emotions have to hijack your response. You can take the information and then decide, consciously, how to act. This is what emotional control actually is. It's not about becoming emotionally numb. It's not about pretending you don't feel things. It's about creating space between the feeling and the reaction. In that space, you have power. The person who can create this space has a massive advantage over everyone who can't. They make better decisions. They have better relationships. They're more resilient. They're harder to manipulate. They're more respected. But most importantly, they're free. There's a concept in Stoic philosophy called the dichotomy of control. It's simple, but most people never really understand it. There are things you can control, and there are things you can't control. Wisdom is knowing the difference. You cannot control what other people do. You cannot control what happens to you. You cannot control the weather, the economy, or whether other people like you. But you can control your responses. You can control your actions. You can control how you interpret what happens to you. This is where your power lies. Not in trying to control the external world, which is impossible, but in mastering your internal world, which is completely within your reach. Most people spend their lives trying to control things they can't control, and they ignore the one thing they can control: their own responses. They get frustrated when other people don't act the way they want them to. They get anxious about things that might happen in the future. They get depressed about things that happened in the past. All of this is a waste of energy. All of this is giving away your power. The person with emotional control doesn't waste energy on things they can't change. They focus all their energy on the one thing they can change: themselves. This creates a kind of internal stability that's almost unshakable, because no matter what happens externally, they know they can handle it internally. Other people sense this. They can feel it. There's something different about someone who has genuine emotional control. They have a kind of centered presence that's both calm and powerful. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. They don't need external validation. They don't need to win every argument or be right about everything. They're secure in themselves. This makes them incredibly hard to manipulate, because manipulation works by triggering emotional reactions. If you can't trigger the reaction, you can't control the person. Think about the people who have tried to manipulate you in your life. How did they do it? They probably made you angry, or afraid, or guilty, or insecure. They pushed your emotional buttons and then tried to direct your reaction. But what if you didn't have buttons to push? What if you could receive their attempts at manipulation with the same emotional temperature as someone trying to sell you something you don't need? You'd see right through them. You'd see what they were doing, and you'd be immune to it. This is one of the most practical benefits of emotional control. It makes you very difficult to manipulate. And in a world full of people trying to manipulate you, this is incredibly valuable. But there's something even more powerful than being immune to manipulation, and that's being able to maintain your emotional equilibrium no matter what's happening around you. Most people's emotional state is completely dependent on their circumstances. If things are going well, they feel good. If things are going poorly, they feel bad. Their internal weather is controlled by their external weather. But the person with emotional control has internalized their emotional climate. Their mood doesn't depend on their circumstances. They can be calm in chaos. They can be centered in crisis. They can be stable when everything around them is unstable. This doesn't mean they don't feel emotions. It means their emotions don't control them. There's a famous story about a Zen master whose barn burned down. When his neighbors came to console him, he simply said, "Is that so?" When they told him his horses had run away, he said, "Is that so?" When they told him his horses had returned and brought wild horses with them, making him much wealthier, he said, "Is that so?" This isn't indifference. This is emotional control. This is understanding that external circumstances are temporary and that your internal state doesn't have to be a victim of your external circumstances. Most people never develop this kind of control because they've never been taught that it's possible. They think emotions just happen to them. They think they're victims of their own feelings. But emotional control can be developed. It's a skill, like any other skill. And like any skill, it gets stronger with practice. The first step is awareness. You have to start paying attention to your emotional patterns. When do you react? What triggers you? What are your emotional weak spots? Most people are completely unconscious of their emotional patterns. They just react automatically, over and over again, in the same predictable ways. But once you start paying attention, you start to see the patterns. You start to notice the gap between the trigger and the reaction. And in that gap, you can make a choice. The second step is acceptance. You have to accept that emotions are natural and normal. You don't fight them or judge them. You just observe them. Fighting your emotions is like fighting the weather. It's pointless and exhausting. But you can observe the weather without being controlled by it. The third step is response rather than reaction. A reaction is automatic and unconscious. A response is deliberate and conscious. When someone insults you, your automatic reaction might be to insult them back. But your conscious response might be to stay calm and either address the issue directly or simply walk away. The reaction gives your power away. The response keeps your power. This takes practice. Lots of practice. Because you're literally rewiring decades of automatic emotional patterns. But every time you choose response over reaction, you get stronger. Every time you create space between stimulus and response, you become more free. And freedom is what this is really about. Freedom from being jerked around by your own emotions. Freedom from being controlled by other people's attempts to manipulate your feelings. Freedom from being a victim of your circumstances. Most people are not free. They think they are, but they're not. They're slaves to their emotions, their reactions, their automatic patterns. But emotional control is liberation. It's the key to everything else. Because once you can control your internal state, you can control your actions. And once you can control your actions, you can control the results you get in life. The person who has mastered their emotions has mastered themselves. And the person who has mastered themselves has real power. Not power over others, power over themselves. Which is the only power that actually matters. Everything else is just an illusion. The money, the status, the ability to control others, all of these are external. They can be taken away. They can disappear. They can change. But the power you have over your own internal state, that's permanent. That's unshakable. That's real. And once you have it, you'll never want to give it up. Because you'll realize what most people never realize. That the most powerful person in any room is not the person who can make the most noise or demand the most attention. It's the person who needs the least from everyone else. The person who is complete within themselves. The person who is not looking for external validation or approval or reaction. The person who has achieved emotional control. That person has access to a kind of power that most people can't even imagine. They can think clearly when everyone else is panicking. They can make good decisions when everyone else is making emotional ones. They can see opportunities when everyone else is distracted by their feelings. They can be trusted because they're predictable. Not boring predictable, but reliably calm and rational predictable. People want to be around them because being around someone with genuine emotional control is calming. It's reassuring. It's like being near someone who knows something you don't know. And they do know something most people don't know. They know that the real battle is not with the external world. The real battle is internal. And they've won that battle, not once, but over and over again, every single day. Because emotional control is not a destination, it's a practice. It's a way of being that you choose, moment by moment, decision by decision. But the more you choose it, the more natural it becomes. The more you practice it, the stronger it gets. Until one day you realize something has changed. You realize that you're not the same person you used to be. You're calmer. You're more centered. You're less reactive. You're more free. And you have access to a kind of power that most people never even knew existed. The power of emotional control. The power of mastering yourself. The power that nobody can take away from you.